The alarm bells rang through the Galactic Council's deep space monitoring station. Commander Zexathera lifted his massive blue head from the tactical display and looked at the main screen with mild interest. His 4 eyes focused on the small dots appearing at the edge of their scanning range. "What do we have, Officer Yill?" Zexathera asked, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded fleets for over 2 centuries. Yill, a thin creature with silver skin and too many fingers, tapped at her console. 12 ships, Commander. Unknown design. They just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of our territory." 12 ships? Zexathera laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "That's barely a patrol group. Are they damaged? Running from something?" The bridge crew began to chuckle. Lieutenant Koth, whose species resembled walking trees, shook his branches in amusement. "Maybe they're refugees, sir, or pirates who got lost." Yill studied her readings more carefully. "The ships are small, Commander. Much smaller than our standard cruisers. I'm reading basic energy signatures, nothing threatening. They seem to be maintaining formation, though." "Formation?" Zexathera's interest dropped even further. "Probably some primitive species trying to look important. Send them the standard greeting message. Tell them to state their business or leave our space." The communications officer, a blob-like being, named Glux, sent the message. The response came back within minutes. "They're asking for permission to approach and speak with our diplomatic representatives," Glux reported. "They say they come in peace and want to establish relations with the Galactic Council." This caused another wave of laughter across the bridge. Zexathera stood up to his full height of 3 meters and looked at the display showing the tiny fleet. Each ship was barely the size of a council escort vessel. He had seen cargo haulers bigger than these ships. "Look at them," he said, pointing at the screen. 12 little ships wanting to talk diplomacy with the greatest military alliance in the galaxy. Do they have any idea who they're dealing with? Officer Yill pulled up more detailed scans. "Commander, I'm reading some interesting energy patterns from their ships. The power output seems higher than their size would suggest. Everything seems bigger when you're that small." Zexathera waved a dismissive hand. "What species are they?" "Do we have them in our database?" "They call themselves humans, sir, from a planet called Earth. I'm running a search now." Yill's fingers danced over her console. After a few moments, she shook her head. "No records of either in our database. They must be from the far outer rim." "Humans." Zexathera tested the word. It sounded strange in his mouth. "Never heard of them. Probably some species that just discovered space travel and thinks they can play with the big powers." Lieutenant Koth rustled his leaves thoughtfully. "Should we send a diplomatic ship to meet them, Commander? Standard first contact protocols?" Zexathera considered this. The Galactic Council had strict rules about first contact with new species. Even tiny, insignificant ones deserved proper diplomatic treatment. It was part of what made the Council different from the old Empire days. "Very well," he decided. "Send Ambassador Kethmore on the diplomatic cruiser. Tell him to bring a small escort. We don't want to scare the little humans with too much firepower." The bridge crew laughed again at this joke. The idea of anyone being scared of Council ships was amusing enough, but the thought of these tiny vessels being frightened was hilarious. "Should we alert the main fleet, Commander?" asked Yill. "For 12 little ships?" Zexathera's laugh was louder this time. "Officer Yill, we have over 3,000 ships in this sector alone. Our smallest battle group has more firepower than their entire civilization probably possesses. No, we'll handle this locally." As the bridge crew continued their duties, Zexathera studied the human fleet on his personal display. The ships maintained perfect spacing and moved with precision. It showed discipline, he had to admit that. But discipline didn't make up for being completely outgunned. "Commander," Glux called out, "the humans are asking if they can send technical specifications for docking procedures. They want to make sure their ships are compatible with our station designs." "How polite of them," Zexathera said with amusement. "Tell them we'll handle the docking. Our systems can accommodate anything they have." The human fleet slowly approached the massive council station. The station was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons and shields. It housed over 50,000 beings and could build entire fleets in its construction bays. Next to it, the human ships looked like insects, approaching a giant. "Visual contact established," reported the sensor operator. Putting it on main screen. The human ships appeared on the massive display that dominated the bridge. They were sleek and dark, with clean lines that suggested speed, but they were so small that they barely registered as threats on the station's defense systems. "Look at that," Zexathera pointed at the screen. Those ships would fit inside our shuttle bays. What do they think they're going to accomplish here? Officer Yill was still studying her readings. Commander, I'm getting some unusual data from their ships. The power signatures keep shifting, and I'm detecting some kind of advanced shielding. Advanced is relative, Zexthera replied. What's advanced for them might be primitive for us. Run a full scan when they get closer. The human fleet continued its approach, moving in perfect formation. Each ship stayed exactly where it should be, adjusting course and speed with mechanical precision. Zexthera had to admit it was impressive flying for such a small species. Commander, called Lieutenant Koth, Ambassador Kethamore is ready to depart. Should he meet them halfway? No, let them come to us, Zexthera decided. If they want to talk to the Galactic Council, they can come to our station. It will give them a proper sense of what they're dealing with. As the hours passed, the human fleet drew closer to the station. Other council ships in the area slowed down to watch the spectacle. Word had spread through the fleet about the tiny human ships, and many commanders were curious to see these bold little beings who thought they could negotiate with galactic powers. They're really quite brave, admitted Yill as she watched the approach. Flying 12 ships into council space takes courage, even if it's foolish courage. Zexthera nodded slowly. I'll give them that. They have spirit. It's almost a shame they're so small and weak. With the right guidance, they might have made decent auxiliary forces. The human ships finally reached docking range of the massive station. Compared to the council structure, they looked like toys. The station's docking bay doors opened, each one large enough to swallow several human ships at once. Well, Zexthera said as he prepared to leave the bridge to meet with the ambassadors. Let's go see what these little humans want. This should be entertaining if nothing else. As he walked toward the diplomatic sections, Zexthera couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about these humans. Most species approached the council with fear or desperate hope, but the human communications had been calm, professional, almost businesslike. They acted like equals requesting a meeting, not primitives begging for help. Still, 12 ships were 12 ships. What could they possibly have that would interest the mighty Galactic Council? Ambassador Kethamore smoothed his ceremonial robes as his diplomatic cruiser approached the human fleet. The cruiser was 10 times the size of the largest human ship, and he expected the humans to be properly impressed. His long neck allowed him to look down at the tactical display showing the 12 small vessels maintaining their formation. Ambassador, his aide Jexla whispered, the humans have responded to our docking request. They're sending one representative to meet with you. Good, Kethamore replied. Have they expressed proper respect for council authority? Jexla looked uncomfortable. They've been very polite, sir. Professional. But they haven't used any of the usual subordinate language we expect from new species. This made Kethamore pause. Most species approaching the council for the first time were nervous, eager to please, sometimes even frightened. They used formal titles and begged for the honor of speaking with council representatives. The humans seem to be treating this like a business meeting between equals. Perhaps they don't understand proper protocol, Kethamore decided. We'll educate them gently. The diplomatic cruiser moved alongside the lead human ship. Even up close, the human vessel looked impossibly small. Kethamore could see his entire ship reflected in its dark hull. How did they fit a crew inside something so tiny? Docking tube connected, reported the pilot. The humans have matched our airlock perfectly. Very precise flying, sir. Kethamore made his way to the airlock, followed by his diplomatic team and 2 ceremonial guards. The guards were there for show, not protection. What threat could these tiny beings possibly pose? The airlock opened, and Kethamore got his first look at a human. She was small, barely reaching his shoulder, with pale skin, and dark hair pulled back in a tight style. She wore a uniform that looked military but carried no visible weapons. Behind her stood 2 other humans, also in uniforms, also appearing calm and professional. Ambassador Kethamore, the human said, extending her hand in what Kethamore recognized as a greeting gesture from his briefing files. I'm Captain Sarah Chen, commanding officer of the UES Indomitable. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. Kethamore shook the offered hand, surprised by its firm grip. Captain Chen, I am honored to make first contact with your species. I must say you've shown remarkable courage in approaching our space with such a small force. Captain Chen smiled slightly. Small force, Ambassador? This is just our forward reconnaissance element. We prefer to make initial contact with a light footprint, less intimidating for all parties involved. Reconnaissance element? Kethamore repeated the phrase. In Council military terms, reconnaissance elements were advanced scouts for larger forces, but that couldn't be what she meant. "Please come aboard," Captain Chen gestured toward her ship. "I'd like to show you our vessel and discuss the possibility of establishing formal relations between humanity and the Galactic Council." Kethmore followed her through the airlock and immediately noticed several things. The human ship was much larger inside than it appeared from outside, with corridors that seemed to stretch deeper than should have been possible. The walls were lined with displays showing complex data, and crew members moved with military precision. "Your ship is quite impressive inside," Kethmore admitted as they walked. "The external size is deceiving." "Thank you," Captain Chen replied. "Human engineering focuses on efficiency. We've learned to pack a lot of capability into compact designs." They entered what appeared to be a briefing room. The walls displayed star charts showing vast sections of the galaxy, with routes marked in different colors. Kethmore noticed many of the routes led through areas that the Council considered empty space. "Captain Chen," Kethmore began carefully, "your people must be very new to space travel. The Galactic Council has extensive records of all spacefaring civilizations, and we have no information about humans or Earth." Captain Chen's expression didn't change. "Earth is located in what you probably call the Outer Rim. We've been exploring space for several centuries, but we've preferred to observe before making contact." "Several centuries?" Kethmore was surprised. If humans had been spacefaring that long, why had the Council never encountered them? "We're cautious by nature," Captain Chen continued. "We like to understand the political situation before introducing ourselves. The galaxy can be a dangerous place." Jexla leaned forward. "What kind of political understanding have you gained, Captain?" "We know about the Council's member species, your territorial boundaries, your military capabilities." Chenny replied casually. "We've studied your laws, your trade agreements, your recent conflicts. We believe humanity would be a good fit for Council membership." Kethmore felt a chill run down his spine. The humans had been watching the Council for centuries without being detected? How was that possible? "Captain," he said slowly, "if your people have been observing us for so long, you must understand that the Council values transparency. Why reveal yourselves now?" "Because it's time," Chen said simply. "Humanity has reached a point where isolation is no longer beneficial. We're ready to take our place in the galactic community." The way she said "our place" suggested humans expected a significant role, not a minor membership. Kethmore decided to probe further. "Your fleet is quite small for a first contact mission," he observed. "Most species send their largest ships to impress us." Captain Chen smiled again. "Ambassador, we've studied your species' psychology. Big displays of force tend to make people nervous. We prefer diplomacy based on respect rather than intimidation." "But surely 12 ships represent a significant portion of your military?" Jexla asked. "Not really," Chen replied. "The Terran Navy operates several thousand vessels across multiple fleets. This is just a diplomatic mission." "Several thousand vessels?" Kethmore tried to hide his shock. If that was true, humanity possessed a fleet nearly as large as some Council member species. "Several thousand," he repeated. "That's quite impressive for an isolated civilization." "We've had time to build up our capabilities," Chen said. "And we've learned from observing other species' mistakes." Kethmore decided to test the humans' knowledge. "What mistakes would those be, Captain?" "Building large, expensive ships that are easy targets," Chen replied without hesitation. "Focusing on intimidation over effectiveness, spreading forces too thin across too many systems. The Council species have made impressive ships, but they're not always practical ships." This criticism of Council ship design surprised Kethmore. Most species praise Council vessels and tried to copy their designs. "Our ships may look small," Chen continued, "but they're built for effectiveness, not show. Each vessel in this fleet could engage multiple Council ships if necessary." "If necessary?" Kethmore's voice rose slightly. "Captain, surely you're not suggesting conflict?" "Of course not," Chen said quickly. "We come in peace, Ambassador. I'm simply explaining that humans don't confuse size with capability. We've learned to be efficient." The meeting continued for another hour, with Captain Chen providing more details about human civilization. She spoke of colonies throughout the Outer Rim, of industrial complexes hidden in asteroid fields, of a society that valued both science and military preparedness. Throughout the conversation, Kethmore found himself increasingly uncomfortable. The humans spoke with quiet confidence, as if they were already equals to the Council rather than petitioners seeking membership. They had answers for every question, and seemed to know more about Council operations than most member species. When the meeting ended, Kethmore returned to his ship with many more questions than answers. As his cruiser departed, he looked back at the human fleet. 12 small ships, floating in perfect formation. "Ambassador," Jexla said quietly, "did you notice something about their ship names?" "Ship names? UES Indomitable, UES Relentless, UES Retribution. These aren't names you give to exploration vessels, sir." Kethmore nodded slowly. He had noticed the names, and they worried him. These were warship names, chosen by a species that understood conflict. "Contact Commander Zex Thara," he ordered. "Tell him we need to talk immediately." "And Jexila?" "Yes, Ambassador." "Run a deep scan of those human ships. I want to know what we're really dealing with." Intelligence analyst Morden worked through the night cycle. Her 6 eyes focused on multiple displays showing data streams from across Council space. Ambassador Kethmore's report about the humans had bothered her more than she wanted to admit. Something about their calm confidence didn't fit with what she knew about first contact situations. She started with the obvious searches, looking for any mention of humans or Earth in the Council databases. Nothing. Then she expanded her search to include intercepted communications, trader reports, and incident files from the Outer Rim territories. At first, she found nothing unusual. The Outer Rim was vast and mostly empty, with occasional pirate raids and mineral prospecting operations. But as she dug deeper, a pattern began to emerge. "Computer, show me all incidents in sectors 445 through 892 over the past 50 years, she commanded. The displays filled with data points scattered across the star map. Most were routine: pirate attacks, equipment failures, navigation errors. But there were gaps, places where incident reports should have been but weren't. Morden leaned forward, her main eyes studying the pattern while her auxiliary eyes continued monitoring other data streams. "Computer, highlight all missing or incomplete incident reports in this region." Red markers appeared across the map. Dozens of them, all following a rough path through space that curved around the edge of Council territory. "Interesting," Morden muttered. She opened the first incomplete report. "Mining Station Beta 7 ceased communications 3 months ago. Patrol vessel found debris field but no survivors. Cause unknown. Investigation suspended due to resource constraints." She opened another. "Pirate base in the Keldon system went silent. Neighboring systems report all raiding activity in the region has stopped. No Council involvement reported." Another. "Trade convoy to the Rim colonies found the halfway station abandoned. All equipment intact, no signs of struggle, but entire crew missing." One by one, Morden read through reports of disappearances, abandoned stations, and silent bases. All in the same general region of space, all with no clear explanation. Computer cross-referenced these incidents with any reports of unknown vessels. New data appeared. Trader reports mentioning dark ships seen at the edge of sensor range. Pirate communications talking about ghosts that appeared and vanished without warning. Emergency transmissions cut short, sometimes ending with descriptions of small ships moving fast. Mordune's skin began to change color, a sign of stress in her species. The pattern was becoming clear, and it frightened her. She opened a new search, looking for any recent changes in the region. What she found made her stand up from her workstation. "Computer, show me current status of all known criminal organizations in sectors 445 through 892. The display showed a map that had been red with pirate bases and criminal strongholds just 5 years ago. Now it was mostly green, indicating safe space. Dozens of criminal organizations had simply vanished, their bases either destroyed or abandoned. "This is impossible," Morden whispered. "Someone cleaned out the entire Outer Rim and we never noticed." She began tracing the path of disappearances, following them backward through time. The pattern stretched back decades, a slow but steady elimination of criminal elements throughout a massive region of space. It had happened so gradually that no one had connected the incidents. "Computer, overlay the human fleet's approach vector with these incident locations." The path of the human ships matched perfectly with the trail of vanished criminals and abandoned outposts. They had come through space that had been dangerous 50 years ago, but was now mysteriously quiet. Morden activated her emergency communication link to Commander Zexathara's flagship. "Commander, this is Intelligence Analyst Morden. I need to speak with you immediately about the humans." "Morden, it's the middle of the night cycle. Unless the galaxy is ending, this can wait." "Sir, I believe we may have a serious situation. The humans aren't what they appear to be." There was a pause. Explain. Sir, someone has been systematically eliminating criminal organizations throughout the Outer Rim for the past 50 years. Pirates, smugglers, illegal mining operations, slave traders, all gone. And the path of destruction leads directly to where the human fleet came from. Another pause. Longer this time. Are you suggesting the humans are responsible? I'm suggesting we should consider the possibility, sir. They claim to have been observing us for centuries. They know details about our operations that they shouldn't know. And their ships came from a region that used to be full of dangerous criminals but is now completely clean. Morden, you're talking about 12 small ships. How could they possibly clear out entire sectors? I don't know, sir, but the timeline matches perfectly, and there's something else. Morden pulled up another display. I've been analyzing the energy signatures from their ships. The power readings are much higher than their size should allow. Higher how? Each of their ships is generating power, levels similar to our heavy cruisers, sir, but they're a fraction of the size. The communication link went silent for several minutes. Finally, Zexthera's voice returned, much more serious than before. Send me everything you've found. I'll review it and contact Ambassador Kethmore. Yes, sir. Commander, there's one more thing. What? I intercepted part of a communication from the human fleet earlier. They mentioned something about rules of engagement alpha and maintaining peaceful posture until ordered otherwise. Rules of engagement? Zexithara's voice was sharp. Those are military terms. Yes, sir. And there was a reference to something called home fleet and authorization for full response if threatened. Morden could hear other voices in the background as Zexthara shared the information with his command staff. Morden, I want you to continue monitoring their communications. Try to learn more about this home fleet they mentioned. Already working on it, sir. But their encryption is very advanced. More advanced than most council member species use. Keep trying. And Morden? Yes, sir? Don't share this information with anyone else until we understand what we're dealing with. The communication ended, leaving Morden alone with her displays and her growing concern. She looked at the star map showing the human fleet's position. 12 small ships that had appeared from nowhere, carrying impossible power sources and speaking in military terms about home fleets and rules of engagement. She opened a new search, looking for any other references to humans in the council databases. This time she found something that made her blood run cold. Computer. Display all references to Terra or Terran in historical files. A single entry appeared from the personal logs of an explorer who had vanished in the Outer Rim 15 years ago. Day 847. Found something strange today. Detected massive energy signatures from a system the charts say is empty. Tried to investigate, but my ship's systems failed as I approached. Last thing I saw before losing power was something huge in orbit around the third planet, bigger than anything I've ever seen. Sending this log by emergency beacon in case I don't make it back. The system coordinates in the log matched the direction the human fleet had come from. Morden stared at the entry for a long time, her mind racing. The humans had said their ships came from Earth, the third planet from their sun. If the explorer had seen something huge in orbit around that planet 15 years ago, what exactly had the humans built out there? She began a new search, looking for any other ships that had approached that region of space and never returned. The results filled her with dread. Over the past 50 years, dozens of vessels had vanished while exploring the area around the human home system. Computer. Estimate travel time from human home system to our current position at standard council ship speeds. Estimated travel time. 14 months. Now calculate travel time if the human ships had been accelerating continuously since leaving their home system. Insufficient data for accurate calculation. Morden leaned back in her chair. The humans had arrived much faster than should have been possible, which meant their ships were far more advanced than they appeared. 12 small ships from a mysterious civilization that had spent decades clearing criminals from space, whose home system seemed to be protected by something huge, whose vessels carried impossible amounts of power, and who spoke casually of thousands of warships and home fleets. For the first time in her career, intelligence analyst Morden wondered if the Galactic Council might have met something they couldn't handle. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council had never seen anything quite like the demonstration that Admiral Veltar was planning. Representatives from 12 major species had gathered to show off their military might to the small human delegation. It was meant to be impressive, educational, and perhaps a little intimidating. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck alongside Ambassador Kethmore and several other council dignitaries. Through the massive viewport, she could see hundreds of warships arranged in perfect formations. Massive dreadnoughts from the Velkhani Empire, sleek destroyers from the Therian Republic, and the enormous carrier vessels of the Zenderan fleet. Impressive display, Captain Chen said quietly, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched the ships maneuver. Admiral Veltar, an imposing figure with metallic skin and glowing blue eyes, gestured proudly at the fleet. Captain Chen, what you see here represents the combined military might of the Galactic Council. Over 800 vessels, each one capable of destroying entire cities. Captain Chen nodded politely. Very impressive, Admiral. Your coordination is excellent. This is just a small fraction of our total capabilities, Veltar continued. The Council maintains over 50,000 combat vessels across our territories. No force in the galaxy can challenge us. I'm sure that's very reassuring for Council member species, Chen replied. Ambassador Kethmore watched the human captain carefully. Her expression remained neutral, almost bored. She showed no sign of the awe or fear that most species displayed when viewing Council military power. Captain, Kethmore said carefully, earlier you mentioned that humanity operates several thousand ships. How do your vessels compare to what you see here? Captain Chen studied the massive warships performing, their formation flying. Different design philosophy, Ambassador. Your ships are certainly impressive to look at. Impressive to look at. Admiral Veltar's voice carried a hint of offense. Captain, these are the most powerful warships ever built. Each of our heavy cruisers carries enough firepower to level continents. I'm sure they do, Chen replied calmly. As I said, different philosophy. Veltar exchanged glances with the other council officers. The humans' response was not what they had expected. Most species would be asking for technical specifications, begging for trade agreements, or expressing amazement at council engineering. Captain Chen, Kethmore tried a different approach. Perhaps you could tell us more about human ship design? We're very interested in learning about your technology. Chen was quiet for a moment, watching as a massive Velkhani dreadnought executed, a slow turn, its hull bristling with weapon turrets. Human ships are built for efficiency, Ambassador. We learned long ago that bigger isn't always better. But surely size provides advantages, Admiral Veltar insisted. More weapons, stronger shields, larger crews. It also provides a bigger target, Chen said simply, and requires more resources, more maintenance, more logistics support, Commander. Zexathera, who had been listening quietly, stepped forward. Captain, you mentioned that your 12 ships represent a reconnaissance element. What exactly are they capable of? Chen turned to look at him, and for a moment Zexathera felt like he was being evaluated by a predator. They're capable of completing their mission, Commander, which is establishing peaceful contact with the Galactic Council and evaluating potential for formal relations. And if the evaluation is negative? Zexathera asked. Captain Chen's expression didn't change. Then we report back to Terra and recommend alternative approaches. The casual mention of reporting back sent a chill through the assembled officers. If humanity had been observing the Council for centuries without being detected, what other capabilities did they possess? Captain, Admiral Veltar decided to be more direct. You seem remarkably confident for someone whose entire fleet could fit inside one of our carrier vessels. For the first time, Captain Chen smiled slightly. Admiral, one of the first things humans learned about warfare is that confidence should be based on capability, not appearance. And what capabilities do your ships possess? Zexathara asked. Enough, Chen replied simply. The evasive answer frustrated the council officers, but before they could press further, Captain Chen made a comment that would haunt their dreams for years to come. You know, she said conversationally, looking at the massive fleet display. This reminds me of the old Terran saying about speaking softly and carrying a big stick, though we've always preferred the opposite approach. Which is? Kethmore asked. Speak normally and carry devastating capability. Chen's voice remained casual, as if she were discussing the weather. Much more efficient than trying to intimidate people with displays. Admiral Veltar laughed. Captain, no offense, but 12 small ships hardly constitute devastating capability. Chen turned to look at him directly. Admiral, each ship in our reconnaissance element carries enough antimatter to sterilize the surface of an inhabited world. Their fusion reactors can power cities. Their defensive systems could deflect everything you see in that display. And they're considered light scouting vessels by Terran Navy standards. The observation deck went completely silent. The casual way Chen delivered this information was somehow more frightening than if she had shouted threats. Antimatter? Commander Zexathera's voice was barely a whisper. Standard power source for human vessels, Chen replied. Much more efficient than the fusion systems most council species use. How much antimatter? Admiral Veltar asked, his earlier confidence evaporating. I'm not authorized to discuss specific technical details, Chen said. But I can say that human engineering focuses on maximum effect with minimum mass. Why build a ship the size of a city when you can achieve the same result with something the size of a building? Ambassador Kethmore felt his legs go weak. Captain, when you say your ships could deflect everything in that display, I mean exactly that, Ambassador. Human defensive technology is quite advanced. We've had to be innovative operating alone in a dangerous galaxy. But there are 800 ships out there, protested Admiral Veltar. Chen nodded. Yes, and they're very impressive ships, but they're also very large targets, and their formation patterns leave several exploitable weaknesses. If this were a combat situation rather than a demonstration, those formations would be tactically unsound. The council officers stared at her in shock. She was calmly discussing how to defeat their entire assembled fleet, as if it were an academic exercise. Of course, Chen continued, combat is not our objective here. Humanity hopes to establish peaceful and productive relations with the council. And if peaceful relations aren't possible? Zexathera asked quietly. Chen was quiet for a long moment, watching the ships continue their display. Commander, humanity spent several centuries observing galactic civilization before making contact. We've seen species rise and fall, empires expand and collapse, wars that devastated entire sectors. We learned a very important lesson from all of this. Which is, peace is always preferable. But if peace isn't possible, then overwhelming force applied quickly and decisively saves lives in the long run. She turned to face the assembled officers. The Terran Navy maintains a simple doctrine. We prefer diplomacy. We respect strength, but we don't tolerate aggression. Our reconnaissance elements are trained to assess not just diplomatic possibilities, but also potential threats. Are we a threat? Admiral Veltar asked. That remains to be determined, Chen replied. So far the council has been hospitable and professional. We have no reason to expect problems. The implication was clear. As long as the council remained hospitable, there would be no problems. But if the situation changed... Captain Kethmore said carefully, exactly how large is the Terran Navy? Large enough, Chen replied. Admiral, would it be possible to see more of the fleet demonstration? Human Command would be very interested in a detailed report on Council tactical capabilities. As the group moved to get a better view of the display, Admiral Veltar whispered to Commander Zexathera, we need to contact the Council immediately. I think we may have made a terrible mistake. What kind of mistake? Zexathera whispered back. We assumed they were primitive because their ships are small. But what if they're not primitive at all? What if they're just more advanced than we are? Both officers looked at Captain Chen, who was calmly observing their fleet with the detached interest of someone studying insects. For the first time in Council history, they wondered if they were the ones being evaluated for membership in something much larger than themselves. The emergency session of the Galactic Council's High Command had been called at 300 hours, pulling senior officers from their sleep cycles across 12 different time zones. The holographic displays in the war room showed tactical analyses, intelligence reports, and most disturbing of all, a complete reassessment of humanity based on 3 days of observation. Admiral Zexathera stood before the assembled commanders, his usual confidence replaced by careful concern. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings, we have a situation that requires immediate attention. Fleet Admiral Catherine, the Supreme Military Commander of the Council Forces, leaned forward in her chair. Her species communicated partly through color changes in their skin, and right now she was showing deep blue patterns of worry. Zexathera, your initial reports described the humans as a minor species with 12 small ships. Now you're calling an emergency session. What's changed? Zexathera activated the central display. Everything, Admiral. Intelligence Analyst Morden, please present your findings. Morden stepped forward, her 6 eyes focusing on different members of the assembly as she spoke. Honored commanders, our initial assessment of humanity was completely wrong. The humans are not a primitive species making first contact. They are an advanced military power that has been operating in our region of space for decades. The room erupted in surprised voices from multiple species. Admiral Catherine raised her hand for silence. Explain, she commanded. Over the past 50 years, someone has systematically eliminated every criminal organization, pirate base, and illegal operation in a region of space covering 47 sectors, Mordun continued. Smuggler fleets that had operated for centuries simply vanished. Slave trading networks that had avoided council forces for generations were found abandoned. The entire Outer Rim went from being the most dangerous region of space to being completely pacified. And you believe the humans did this? Asked Admiral Veltar. The timeline matches perfectly with human expansion into space. The path of eliminated threats leads directly from the human home system to our current position. Most importantly, we've intercepted human communications referring to pacification operations and criminal element removal protocols. Commander Zexthara added, the humans didn't stumble into our space by accident. They deliberately chose this moment to make contact, after spending decades preparing the region and studying our capabilities. Fleet Admiral Catherine's skin was now showing rapid color changes indicating deep thought. What about their military strength? Can 12 ships really pose a threat to Council forces? Mordun activated another display. Each human ship generates power levels equivalent to our heavy cruisers, despite being a fraction of the size. They carry antimatter reactors and weapon systems we can't fully understand. Most disturbing, Captain Chen casually mentioned that each of their ships could sterilize continents. She was probably exaggerating, suggested Admiral Veltar, though his voice lacked conviction. Admiral, Mordun continued, we detected energy spikes from the human ships during yesterday's fleet demonstration. Our analysis suggests they were conducting active scans of our entire fleet, mapping weapon systems, shield frequencies, and tactical capabilities. They weren't impressed by our display. They were studying it. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans had been evaluating Council military strength while pretending to be awed by it. There's more, Zexthara said quietly. Captain Chen mentioned that their 12 ships represent a forward reconnaissance element of a much larger force. When pressed, she indicated that humanity operates several thousand vessels. Several thousand antimatter-powered ships, Mordun added. Each one potentially capable of engaging multiple Council vessels. Fleet Admiral Catherine stood up, her skin now showing the gold patterns that indicated critical decision-making mode. What do we know about their home system? Very little, Mordun admitted. But we found records of an explorer who detected massive energy signatures in orbit around Earth 15 years ago, something huge that disabled his ship from a distance. When he tried to investigate, a space station? Or a fleet base or defensive platforms? We simply don't know. Admiral Veltar spoke up. What are you suggesting? That humanity has been secretly building a military force capable of challenging the Council? I'm suggesting, Zexthara replied, that humanity has already built such a force. They've spent centuries watching us, learning our weaknesses, preparing for this moment. The question is, what do they want? Fleet Admiral Catherine began pacing, a sign of intense concentration in her species. Have they made any demands? Threats? No threats, Zexthara said. They've been perfectly polite and professional. They want to establish diplomatic relations and discuss possible Council membership. Then perhaps we're overreacting, suggested another admiral. If they wanted to attack us, wouldn't they have done so already? Mordun shook her head. Respectfully, Admiral, I don't think they want to attack us. I think they want to join us, but on their terms as equals. Equals? Admiral Veltar's voice rose. We have 50,000 ships. And they've demonstrated that they can build ships superior to ours, Mordun replied. Quality over quantity. If they have several thousand vessels with the capabilities we've observed, they may actually be more powerful than the Council. The room erupted in arguments. Some commanders refused to believe that a single species could challenge Council supremacy. Others worried that humanity represented an existential threat. All were concerned about the precedent of admitting a species that might be more advanced than existing Council members. Fleet Admiral Catherine raised her hand for silence again. What does Captain Chen want from us? Normal diplomatic relations, Zexthara replied. Trade agreements, information sharing, mutual defense treaties, standard Council membership benefits. And what are they offering in return? Advanced technology, military cooperation, and access to the regions of space they've pacified. They've turned the most dangerous area of the galaxy into safe territory. Catherine considered this. So they're offering to share their advanced capabilities with us? If we accept them as equals, Mordun confirmed. But Admiral, there's something else. I've been analyzing their communication patterns, and I believe they're in constant contact with their home fleet. Everything we say and do is being reported back to Terra in real time. Which means the human home fleet is watching this entire interaction. How we treat their diplomatic mission will determine their future relationship with the Council. The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't just making first contact. They were conducting a final evaluation of the Galactic Council's worthiness as an ally. Fleet Admiral Catherine's skin showed the deep orange patterns of major decision-making. Recommendations? Zexthera stepped forward. I recommend we treat humanity as we would any major power, respect their capabilities, honor their diplomatic mission, and work toward mutually beneficial relations. And if they're hostile? Asked Admiral Veltar. Then we're already in more trouble than we can handle, Mordun replied. If humanity wanted to destroy the Council, they wouldn't have announced themselves with a diplomatic mission. They would have simply acted. Fleet Admiral Catherine made her decision. We proceed with formal diplomatic relations, but we also quietly upgrade our defensive postures and begin developing countermeasures to their technology. Admiral Zexithara said carefully, I don't think we should underestimate their intelligence capabilities. If we prepare for war while conducting diplomacy, they'll know. Then what do you suggest? I suggest we do exactly what they're doing. Be prepared for anything but hope for the best. As the meeting ended and commanders returned to their duties, Fleet Admiral Catherine remained in the war room, studying the tactical displays. 12 small ships had changed everything. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted overnight, and the Galactic Council was no longer the supreme authority they had always believed themselves to be. She opened a secure channel to the Council's civilian leadership. It was time to inform the politicians that they were about to welcome either their most valuable allies or their most dangerous rivals. Either way, the galaxy would never be the same again. In the distance, the human fleet maintained its perfect formation, 12 small ships that had revealed the existence of something much larger hiding in the darkness between the stars. Something that had been watching, learning, and preparing for this moment. The age of human isolation was ending. What came next would depend on wisdom, diplomacy, and the hope that two powerful civilizations could find a way to coexist among the stars.